The reality is the best and most fulfilling careers don't happen by design. We tend to stumble through them and they unfold before us. But there are a few things that we can do to make sure that with every step in our career, we're able to move that ball forward and build that career purpose and do what we love. Today, I'm going to show you 3 tips to do just that. Welcome back to another episode of Sales Lab Live. My name is David Premer, and I'm excited to get into this topic. This is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I've obviously taken a bit of an irregular career path to get where I am today. I go on lots of podcasts where people say things like, so are your parents ever upset with you that you invested all this time in your education, you became a research scientist, only to end up in sales and doing what you do? And I say, no, absolutely not. My background gave me an excellent preparation in many ways for what I do today. But I'd be lying if I said that what I do today is something that I saw 20-something years ago and architected completely on purpose. The reality is, as I said, we tend to stumble through our careers and we end up having to agonize over these decisions about where to stay, where to go to. Do I take the promotion? Do I move to a different city? Do I stay in this career? Do I do a wholesale career change? There are lots of these very, very tough decisions, and there's no right decisions. I've met lots of people, and even personally, you make a decision, it ends up in a place that you maybe didn't think you'd end up in, but then ultimately these things happen for a reason. And so what I want to do today was give you a few specific tips to help you think about this idea of the career transition, these decisions you make in your career, and make these decisions hopefully a little bit easier for you. Because the reality is, as we get into let's get into some slidage here for a second. The reality is that, depending on what we pick, the questions we ask ourselves, we will end up in different places. And I love this diagram around architecting a career of purpose, right? Because we're always trying to balance these 3 elements of our career. What do we love to do? Really, what fires us up? What are we actually good at? Because some things that we love to do that we may not be so good at, I love the intersection here they talk about. This is art, right? If we're passionate about something and we're really good at something, then that's art. But if it's not something that people actually need, well, then that's not going to necessarily completely fulfill us. If we have something that we absolutely love to do and people need, but that we're actually not good at, well, that's a fantasy. We're living in a pipe. It's I love playing hockey and the world needs more professional hockey players, but I'm not good at hockey. So, I'm not good enough to be pro. So that's a fantasy, right? And at the same time, if it's something that people need in society and you're really good at, but you don't love it, then it's just work. You're just showing up to work every day. Meanwhile, your passions lie elsewhere. So that's what I love that analogy. And one of the biggest pitfalls that people fall into, and I've seen this time and time again, especially when I was back at Salesforce, where promotions are happening every month, every year, and people are moving around. There's this concept of could versus should. This is actually something I've experienced in my career as well, which is, just because I can do something in my career doesn't mean that that's what I should do. Just because let's say you're watching this, right? And you're thinking to yourself, hey, look, I'm really good at selling stuff. Well, that doesn't mean that you need to be in a sales career for the rest of your days. For example, you might say, well, I want to move into solutions engineering or customer success or support, or I want to move to full-on engineering or become a leader, which is a completely different skill set. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And again, I know this from experience. I've been a startup and SaaS VP of sales a number of times, and I love those jobs. But I was also doing them because it's part of what I can do. I have the skill set necessary to do that job. And there's certain things about those jobs that I love that I was super passionate about. But does that mean that's what I should do for the rest of my career, right? This could versus should. And I'll tell you, having seen this a ton at Salesforce, you have, and maybe you're in this position, these young, enthusiastic sales reps who look to the left of them and the right of them, and they see people doing the same job as them. And they say to themselves, you want this promotion? Oh yeah. Okay. Well then, if you want it, I want it too, right? And it creates this kind of self-reinforcing feedback mechanism where we end up thinking that we want things. Oh, I want the promotion because everyone wants to get promoted, right? Or I want to move. I'm a junior rep. I want to move up to a senior rep, and we think that that's what we do want because everyone around us wants that. We want fame and fortune, all these things. Meanwhile, asking yourself and really being honest with what is it that you want out of life is actually one of the hardest questions. I still, to this day, struggle with it a bit. What is it that you want to do? What are you passionate about? And so I find that these questions, these tips that I'm going to share with you today will help focus you a little bit and help you put you on the path to building this career of fulfillment. And the first tip that I want to share with you has to do with this concept of what I call the career cheat, right? And what is the career cheat? And I have actually this article. You can check it out on my website. It's just cerebralselling.com/career-cheat. And I go into this little story and I talk about my wife, who I love. We've been married for many years. And I say, my wife is a big Adam Levine fan. If you know Adam Levine from Maroon 5, right? And, she watches him on The Voice, back in the day. And she's like, oh, Adam Levine. I'm like, hey, look. If you can somehow architect some hook up with Adam Levine, you have my blessing. Like he's the cheat guy. He's on the cheat list. It's okay, right? And I think about that same concept as it relates to career. And so oftentimes, if you're thinking about how do I make this difficult career decision around what I should be doing with my life, I might ask you. I say, like, forget what you're doing today. Maybe you love what you're doing today. And I came to you and I said, what job could I offer you today such that you would immediately and without hesitation quit the job that you have now to go do this other thing? What is that thing for you, right? It's like your cheat list job. It's a job that is so good that you would have no choice, as much as you love what you do today, than to turn it down. And what I would say as well, and this is what I'm going to get into when I actually get into tactic number 3 or tip number 3, and maybe I'll kind of, tease it now and talk about this now. It doesn't have to be a specific job. So you don't have to say, well, I would absolutely quit my job if I could go be the VP of sales or CEO of this company, or if I could be like a rock star and tour the world. Like, it doesn't have to be a specific job that you know of today. Oftentimes, it's helpful to think of these jobs as characteristics. And you know what? I'm going there right now. Actually, this is tip number 2 is to think about the characteristics, and I'll harmonize this with number 1, is the characteristics versus the role. And what I mean by that is that, you don't have to think about like what's the job title and like what's the pay and what's the span of control. You can think about the characteristics. So like I would like a job where I could work from home all the time, or a job that happens in an office, a job where I have to wear a suit to come to work, or a job where I have to or could wear sweatpants, a job where I get to travel a lot, or a job where I kind of stay put in stationary because I need to be near my family for some reason, right? A job that gives me optionality, a job that is at a smaller company that helps me get more insight into how the business runs because I want to start my own business one day, versus, hey, look, I don't mind working in a big company because I don't mind, kind of having that structure in place. That works well for me. So I would encourage you not to necessarily think about the specific job, but rather the properties of that job. It's like if you're trying to find a house, you might say to yourself, well, I need a house with like 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and it needs to have a 2-car garage because I have these 2 cars. Like, you may not care about where that house is. I mean, of course, location is important as it relates to houses, but you may not care like what color the house is, or is it like a 2-story, a split level, whatever it is. But you're just thinking about, these are the properties. And I would think about the same thing as it relates to the job, right? And some people go through, by the way, transitions in their career. When I was at Salesforce, I had an awesome team. I had 70 sales reps that I managed across 3 different cities, young, enthusiastic sales reps. I loved my job at Salesforce. But now I enjoy the simplicity of not having a big team, right? Like I enjoyed that part of my career. I like the simplicity of what I do now. So these things can change over time, but oftentimes thinking about, what is that career cheat? Like, what is the job? What is like your dream home that you would leave what you currently do for? And what are the characteristics of that job rather than the job title itself? Because oftentimes we get wrapped up, especially when we're a junior something and we're thinking about getting promoted to a senior something. So don't think about the role itself, think about the characteristics. And to jump to kind of tactic or tip number 3 here, this is actually something I refer to as the career pie chart. And I actually made a little video about this a little while back. This is like pre-pandemic. I was actually in San Francisco at a conference and I kind of had this thought. And so I stepped out onto the balcony and shot this lovely video, which you can check out here. And I think I call this like the career pie chart, which you can find on my YouTube channel, which is Cerebral Selling. And the way I kind of think about it is like this. Think about all of the things that you do in your job And if you were to separate those things that you do into three categories, there's things you love to do, there's things you like to do or you don't mind doing, and then there's things you just hate, right? Think about, or you don't like, think about what that breakdown of your job looks like today. So you might say, hey, look, I love mentoring as a leader, people on my team. I love interacting with clients. I love being creative. I don't mind sitting in meetings. I don't mind having to fill out, reports and do some analytics because it helps me understand the business. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I don't mind it. And then there's things I just don't like. I don't like all of the travel, or I don't like all of the Slack notifications going off at all hours of the day. I don't like that I have a quota, for example. I don't like the fact that I have a quota where every month I feel like I'm on this treadmill. It's okay. Like, think about these three categories, and your objective should be, if you're trying to evaluate the next opportunity, I want you to think about how you can grow the love component of this pie chart. So try in every successive role that you take on to do just a little bit more of the things you love. Now look, there's going to be things that in every person's job, in every person's role, things that are not your favorite thing to do. And I totally get that, and that's okay. But the idea should be, to move forward and in every job do a little bit more of those things that you love. Now, this kind of comes back to this question of like, well, what is it that you love to do? And I was having a conversation a couple days ago, actually, with a young rep. Maybe you're watching this at Salesforce. And we were having this conversation. He said, how did you end up where you ended up today? Because I started my career as a research scientist. I joined a startup at the turn of the dot-com boom. I was a coder, so I would do like custom coding for demos and presentations. And then I was, I spent my time across 4 startups. I was at Salesforce for 5 years after they acquired my company. And now I've been running my own business for the last, 4.5 years, which I absolutely have fallen in love with. And every job was good for that kind of, point in time. And they said, how did you kind of try to architect that a little bit? And so this is like my bonus tip. I said, when I look back on my career, and I always think about like, what is it that I've done in every job that I've had, even back to my research scientist days. And you see this in my practice at Cerebral Selling, which is like, I love to learn. Learning is the number. I feel energized, I feel powerful when I learn. And it's not just, learn academically or learn sales-wise. I love to build things. I'll rewire something just to kind of see how it works, put things together. As a kid, I used to build like models of things. I love figuring out how things work. And when I figure out how things work, I love to, in some cases, share what I learned with other people. That's why I realize now I became a research scientist, is because what do research scientists do? They learn, they love to learn, and they try to explain what they've learned to other people in society to help make people better. And I realized I was doing that 20-something years ago, and I am still doing that today. That has been the common thread throughout my entire career. When I think about like, why did I join this startup, or why did I take on this role? It was because I'm a learning junkie. I love to learn. I love to explain things. And when I feel these things, they empower me. And I get fired up, and that's where the passion comes from. And that's why I love what I do at Cerebral Selling, because I love sales. Sales has given me so much in my life, but it also bothers me that when you tell people you're in sales, you become the enemy. So I said, well, how have I solved this problem in the past, where I come back and I say, look, I'm just going to learn. I'm going to learn my ass off about like the science of sales, the study of human behavior, which I've been doing for the last 20 years, being in these companies and being in these roles and figuring out how to build businesses and help grow teams. And that's what I'm going to do with the second half of my career. I can't think of anything better than to help the next generation of sellers really connect with customers in a meaningful way. But I do that the same way I was doing it 20 years ago. I go back to first principles, I learn, and then I explain what I learned to other people in a way that helps them and then they can understand. So that's my superpower. Hopefully you feel the same way. Like my superpower, I say, is synthesis, being able to kind of do these things. And I've done that throughout my entire career. So when I think about my career pie chart, I think about how in every successive role can I just do a little bit more learning, a little bit more giving, a little bit more sharing, because that's what's going to give me the emotional fulfillment. At the end of the day, it's not the paycheck, it's the impact that I get to have, and that's why I do what I do. So the question is for you, why do you do what you do, and how can you do just a little bit more of that with every career transition? So I hope this advice was helpful for you. Again, what did we talk about? We talked about a few things. So we talked about the career cheat, thinking about like what job would you leave today to do your next job for, thinking about the characteristics versus just the role, and then of course thinking about how you can do just a little bit more of the things that you love in every successive role. And again, if you are at a point in your career where you're happy doing what you're doing, don't worry about thinking about what that next thing is. I didn't decide what I was going to do in each step of my career until I found that I was kind of at the end of the previous step. So you have lots of time, often more time than you think, to decide. And if you're having a hard time deciding, well, maybe it's not the right time. So that's the best advice I can give you. I hope you enjoyed today's Sales Lab Live. A little bit different than the ones we've done before, but I wish you all the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at our episode next week.